the push to electric vehicles is being subsidized by you, the taxpayer, according to a new report. But is that okay because EVs will help the planet? Well, that data actually is not that encouraging. So are we being sold a bill of goods, asked to subsidize the EV market when it's not going to actually help the planet? Spoiler alert, yes. That is exactly what's happening. Let's take a look at the data. Now, here is a report that we're going to discuss. But first, we're also going to look at what we know for sure about EVs because, we're being sold this concept. Now, this report is called Overcharged Expectations, Unmasking the True Costs of Electric Vehicles. It just came out this week. Now, fair warning, this is a think tank report. And this particular think tank reportedly receives money from fossil fuel companies. Now, this is when you Google this or ask Google Bard who funds this Texas Public Policy Foundation, Google Bard says this: oh yes, they're funded by the Koch brothers, State Farm, Exxon Mobil, all kinds of, other like corporate funding. But so I was like, okay, I want to see that for myself because this is what Google's telling me. Where did you find this? So I looked through their 990 tax filings for proof that these are Republican aiming or big business donors. I didn't find any proof like that in their filings. So I went back to Google Bard and I said, okay, can you link me to where it says that they're funded by these people? And they said, well, it's in, their in this ProPublica coverage of their taxes. ProPublica says it. And I was like, okay, these forms that you're linking me to do not list donors. This is me saying this, having an argument with Google Bard, with AR.
You do this like twice a week. You get in a fight with Google Bard.
Yes, I do. And I say, are you quite sure about that? And look what they say. Yes, you are correct. I apologize for my mistake. This TPPF is a 501c. They are not required to disclose donors, so we don't know that. It's just that ProPublica said so. So how do they know? I don't know. So when they sort of knock down these like, oh, this is Republican-funded research, there's not proof of that.
Lying.
Like, we really don't know. So I haven't seen it. If you find it for yourself, let me know. I'm getting really tired of winning arguments with artificial intelligence. But I have to do it because
I prefer you do that than have an argument with me.
Right.
If you're feeling like I want to pick a fight with your husband, like I'm just like, you know what, go argue with Google Bard, get it out of your system.
Yeah.
And then come hang out with me and we'll watch Netflix or something.
Okay, that sounds good. Now, is this think tank fossil fuel funded? Again, we just don't know. So let's just put a pin in that. So back to the report. What the authors did is something no one else wants to do, which is add up the costs of EVs, not just to the consumer, but to the economy for each vehicle by adding up the subsidies that the government has granted. So if you take a look at this chart, you'll see they added up the total costs to taxpayers, EV owners, utility companies, and buyers of gas. Well, in this report, they're pointing out who pays for these things. And they found that the true cost of an EV would be almost $50,000 more per car. So you might go out and buy an EV for $20,000 to $30,000. But the true cost of that is an extra $50,000 that you're not paying out of pocket, that we are collectively paying as a society. Now, the next chart shows them adding up the total cost to not only the EV owner, but also, let's see here. This is so small, I can't see it. For federal and state taxes, cost to taxpayers, cost to utility ratepayers, and cost to buyers of gas-powered vehicles who have to then subsidize this either in the gas that they buy or other sort of taxes. And they found that the true cost of fueling an electric vehicle is about $17.33 per gallon equivalency, if we're talking about EVs. So the EV owner may be saving by not having a gas bill, but the rest of us are subsidizing that in other ways because we have to do things like build out charging stations, build out infrastructure, pay for the delivery of this energy, and then also we have subsidies that we're paying for in our taxes for this. Now, under the normal rules of capitalism, if you were to see this chart, the consumers would just reject it. EVs would die out because no one wants to limit their range of travel to, say, 200 miles. No one would want to pay this increased cost. We wouldn't want to pay for these EV charging stations out of pocket. It'd either be private investment And then people would either make money or not based on whether people want it. It would be, I would say, bad. Like the free market would just root it out and say, no, we don't want this. So the government is perverting capitalism here by pushing EVs on it. And maybe that would be acceptable if we could prove that EVs really are the solution to the climate problem. But those numbers are not in either. We've spoken many times about how EVs can increase carbon emissions because they run on electricity from the power grid, which takes up a lot of water. And in some cases, when it's coal powered, takes up even more coal. Here is from Bjorn Lundberg's research on that. He said in China, they had so many coal-powered plants that electric cars worsened the local air with lethal consequences. It's estimated that in Shanghai, pollution from an additional 1 million EVs would kill nearly 3 times as many people annually as adding 1 million gas-powered cars.
My God.
So what do you want to do? And again, EVs would only help if each city drew that power out of nuclear power, which most of them don't. Nuclear plants are being shut down all over the world. And even if we did reduce gas emissions, how would that calculate? Again, according to Bjorn Lundberg, the additional impact would be minimal. The IAEA hopes that we can reach 130 million EVs by 2030. But he points out, even if we did, it would only cut a trifling 0.4% of global emissions by 2030. Electric cars, he says, will be a part of our future solution, but they are not a part of solving climate change. Now, what if, though, we could run EVs on solar and wind power, these renewables? Well, maybe that's a possibility, but if you're voting for that, then you're voting for deforestation, because here's from Michael Schellenberger's book, Apocalypse Never. He says, in the United States, if we were trying to generate all energy with renewables, like solar and wind, we would need 25 to 50% of all the land in the United States. By contrast, today's energy system requires just 0.5% of land in the United States. So think about that for a second. For us to live that life that we live now, which includes children going to school, which includes emergency vehicles, fire departments, your internet that you use, heating your house, staying alive with heat or air conditioning when it's really hot. For all of that to happen, we would need, on renewables, we need to clear out 50% of the entire U.S. land in order to build solar panels, which are not green at all, or wind, which also are not green. They kill whales. So do you want that? Do you want to switch to these renewables, knowing we'd have to contribute to so much deforestation?
What is it, do wind farms kill whales?
That's a whole other, I can bring you that research.
I mean, I know they kill birds. I was like, I forgot about the whales.
No, the ones in the sea kill whales. Yeah, Michael Schellenberger has a lot of research on that. You know what? That's a good one. I've been meaning to bring that to the show because it's really fascinating. And most of these renewable energy companies don't want to admit it, but they do. So maybe it's time we ask our politicians to rethink EVs. Like recently, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said this about two reporters about EVs. She says, it's not reasonable. And I think there's a certain alignment by other European countries on our position. Like, it's just not reasonable to run our world on EVs. Meanwhile, Germany has asked the EU to exempt their laws on switching to electric vehicles if they say, well, we won't go to electric vehicles, but how about instead we'll allow gas-powered cars still on the road, but only if they use synthetic fuel. Well, synthetic fuel is also exactly what it sounds like. It's a synthetic. It has to be made in a factory from things that are mined from the earth with electricity. Is that better? A study from Princeton says it doesn't think so, because in some places they found that researchers found that switching to synthetic natural gas would have little impact on smog-related deaths, but cause a major increase to CO2 emissions. Because, it will. You have to make it. You have to ship it. It adds to the supply chain. So Germany may be asking for a synthetic gas exemption. that's not really better, right? Neither are EVs. So maybe we should tell our politicians, like, hey, let's take a beat on all of this. We don't want to subsidize these things until we see that this may be better for the earth. In the meantime, we don't want to fund by taxpayer credits and money. We don't want to fund this if it's all BS, right?
Yeah, especially when you find out that the Tesla power banks are having to be powered, of course, by
on the electric grid.
Yeah. So it's ridiculous.
Right. Which may be coal.
Right.
Which may be it could be anything.
Well,
really.
look at Germany, the hypocrisy. We had Ralph Schulhammer on the show the other day to talk about this. And we were talking about the hypocrisy of Europe and certainly Germany, which of course shut down their nuclear power plants. And now they're admitting over the past week that they're going to have to they've had to turn on coal powered plants. And they may have to extend that timeline well into next year because they just have an energy shortfall, and manufacturing is now closing down because they wanted to move away from nuclear, which is the safest form of energy, in favor of the dirtiest, which is coal.
Yes.
Now, I mean, it's ridiculous that they have to fight because solar and wind was not enough, basically. That was the admission.
It is not enough unless you want to deforest entire continents.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.